Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Product Marketing Perspective podcast. We delve into the dynamic world of product marketing through the lens of some of the most influential marketing leaders. I'm your host, Kushal Khandelwal, a fellow product marketer and founder of Nosy Neighbor. And I'm thrilled to bring you this brand new episode where we are joined by Gourav Sinha, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Salesforce. With over 17 years of experience in product marketing, Gaurav is a seasoned PMM leader, having worked at renowned organizations like 3M, Adobe, and Salesforce. He has extensive experience in building, managing, and scaling product marketing organizations at large enterprise SaaS companies. And today, Gaurav is here to share with us his experience and perspective on what it takes to build a successful product marketing function. Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us at the PMM Perspective podcast. I'm really excited to start this discussion. And before we dive in, our audience would love to hear a little bit about your journey in product marketing. And perhaps you could also share a little bit about yourself outside of work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kushal. It's a pleasure to be here. And I don't know which part of the world you're in, but good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Okay, so how did I land up in product marketing and my journey here? I would say it was serendipity. It was per chance that I landed in product marketing. I've been in, like, I knew fairly early in my life that I wanted to have a career in marketing. And then this one time I was interviewing for a role which happened to be in field marketing, like regional field marketing for Europe. And I thought that would be exciting at that point in life to kind of work the Europe markets. And through the course of the process, like from when I applied to when I was being interviewed, the scope of the role had changed. And so by the time I joined, I was no longer joining as a field marketer for Europe. I was actually joining as a product marketer. So like I said, serendipity perchance happened to be in product marketing.
Wow.
And no regrets. Absolutely, looking back, I think I've enjoyed this journey. And outside of work, I'm a person who has been in Bangalore for a while now, which I kind of call Bangalore home. I grew up in a town called Jamshedpur, where we are very as part of the father used to work for the Tatas, very privileged to get a life outside of books. So which is why we got a very we got exposed to a lot of sport. Sport was a primary part of my life, and the fun fact is I almost ended up making a career in golf. So when I was in school, I was playing national international competitive golf, and this one time I remember, I was studying for my board exams for the 10th, and
Hmm.
I was reading the newspaper, and I see that the Indian team had been announced for junior golf. And I saw the names and I said, something's not right because, I mean, clearly the person on the team was ranked below me in the order of merit. So I walked
Hmm.
up to my father and I said, have you seen that the Indian team's announced? And, I mean, looks like there's been a mistake. I should have been on it. And he's like, well, I got to tell you something which I haven't told you. And I said, what? And we were having lunch. And he said, no, I got a call and you were on the team. But I said, no. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, because the dates of your, I don't know which tournament it was, but coincides right with your 10th board exams. So coming from a, like a family that obviously put more priority on education. So that was the fun fact that I almost made a
Wow.
career in golf and then did not. But yeah,
Wow.
looking back, no regrets.
I think a lot of product marketers will be glad that you're here instead of there. So, I mean, things happen for good. Yep. So, we're super glad to have you on this podcast as well, right? And all right, let's just dive into a little bit about building your own product marketing team, right? So, in your perspective, Gaurav, how do you, when you join a new company and you're building a new function, how do you decide what is the ideal structure for a particular PMM function? Like, do you go based on skill sets? Do you go based on product line or geography? Like a hybrid of like a couple of these or three of them? And how does the overall organization structure sort of affect your product marketing team structure? Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. I mean, if I talk about product marketing and the space that I've predominantly been in is tech B2B SaaS. That's the kind of
Right.
domain that I've operated in. So I'll kind of try and keep my answer relevant to that because that's where I've had the most experience in.
Perfect.
Now, I believe that product marketing as a function has three roll up paths in these kind of organizations. They either live under the product organization, or
Mhm.
they roll up to the CMO, which is the marketing leadership organization, where they sit parallel to the product organization, like two separate functions. And a lot of other organizations have also seen that product marketing reports into a marketing leader for the BU or the operating unit, and therefore reports up into the general manager of the BU, or the
Right.
GM of the OU. So typically there are these three likely paths. I mean, that I have seen. Depending on how product marketing rolls up, I think that becomes a key decision point for how you want to structure your team, because depending on
Mhm.
each of these there are three different paths. uh, I am a big fan of aligning product marketing teams by product, which is why I think the name suggests that. I'm not a big fan of aligning product marketing teams by geography. Although having said that, I must caveat by saying that it's I have seen a lot of success when product marketeers have a geo ownership. I would not, what I'm trying to say is that I would not have a product marketer aligned only to one geo, but it
Okay.
makes sense to have a product marketer take ownership of growing or developing or penetrating a particular geography. So that in my mind is something that I have found success in and I'm a big fan of.
Awesome. And how does like the overall organization structure sort of affect your team structure? Does that play a role, like a major role? Is that not so relevant according to you?
It is relevant because end of the day it all boils down to accountability. And secondly, a product marketing function, like I said, like depending on where it rolls up to, you're
Hmm.
either playing a proactive role in driving the strategy of the organization, or
Right.
oftentimes you're playing a reactive role, right? When it rolls up into a certain function, like let's say product management, the product management is probably playing the more proactive role in defining where the organization will go in
Hmm.
terms of the product roadmap and so on. And the product marketing function then becomes more of a supporting function.
Correct.
Whereas in certain organizations where they operate as independent parts, I feel that works better, because then the product marketing function also acts as a a beacon of the organization, determines which way to steer the organization, what's happening in the macro environment, what does the product roadmap look like, and therefore I feel they have more equal seat at the table with the product organization.
That's interesting. Awesome. And going a little deeper into building a team, right? Let's talk a little bit about recruitment. uh, what's your general strategy on terms of recruitment? Like, what kind of people do you like to hire, or do you consider skills, background, experience? Which of these do you give the most weightage? How do you pick who you want on your side?
Great. I mean, Kushal, I'll try and answer that from the context of hiring in India, because product
Yep.
marketing as a function, I would say, is evolving in the last few years in India. It's not an extremely mature function like tech or product, in these kind of organizations. So keeping that lens in mind, the way I go about hiring is I obviously try and hire for um, some core skills. Like if I'm trying to hire for product marketers, I definitely look for core skills like messaging, positioning, go to market, and those sorts of things.
Right.
But then the advantage we have sitting in India is that because the job function has been evolving, a lot of people don't necessarily start careers in product marketing. They
Correct.
start careers in adjacent areas of marketing, and then they kind of grow into, or move into product marketing. Now I look at that as a strength versus a weakness. What it allows us to do is that it allows, and when I'm hiring, I try and look for those core PMM skills, and once those core PMM skills are met, the demography of the team, I try and get as much diversity in the adjacent skills. So, we are just lucky that in India, a lot of people have experience in growth marketing, in demand marketing, in social, in content, in events, all sorts of things. Now, imagine when we are trying to put a team together, I think that is something I really look for. That first hire a standard set of really, best in class core skills, and then try and bring
Right.
in diversity with your adjacencies.
That's pretty interesting because I think diversity sort of brings in a lot of different perspectives, and it really gives like a good space for creativity and innovation, right? So that's pretty spot on, I think. Yeah. Right. Awesome. In fact, I myself come from a sales background. I've done sales, I've done content marketing, and then I fell into product marketing myself. So I
And it
understand what
makes
you're
you
talking.
richer, it makes you richer as a product marketer when you're just able to put yourself in the shoes of your counterparts and see that,
Correct.
why do they need me, right? So
Correct.
it's just that.
Exactly. So when I work with sales team, I know that okay, this is what I required when I was in sales. Now I can give that to them. Right. So that's definitely helpful. Interesting. Awesome. And can you talk a little bit more about your interview process and the strategy you use to recruit? How do you identify the skills that you require? You said you look for core skills and you look for adjacent skills. Like, how do you identify, how do you evaluate the level of the skills they have? Is that what you need? And so on.
That's a great question, Kushal, and I think it's in my mind it's an extension of the previous question you asked me.
Yeah.
So I personally think, and this is my personal mantra, is that your team is your best asset, right? So I try and put infinite amounts of energy in hiring a team, and I do believe that everyone I want to hire on the team should be better than me. Like that's one north star I operate with.
Wow.
Now, having said that, the way I kind of go about it is once obviously there's this whole process of floating your role, having a job description. So we try and make sure that we're not just doing something. We're really trying to call out what we need this team to be. Like so, we put in serious effort. Try and iterate on that process. Once people start applying, typically in most organizations, it's recruitment who will screen the profiles and give it to the hiring manager.
Right.
I try and play that role a lot. Like I block, some time in my week where I'm able to go into individual profiles and kind of read through them. So it's a partnership. Like the recruiting team will say that, okay, here are 20 profiles or 50 profiles for you, and I'll try and look at 50 more on my own. So it does add more time, but then I think it's worth the effort. And then what I insist on doing is that the first round screening is something I always do myself if I am the hiring manager. When I do that screening, what I'm essentially trying to look for is what's written on the profile. Does it measure up to what the person's saying as part of the
Right.
narrative? If those two match, I think that's a go. I'm not trying to dive too deep into the first screening round. The next steps is basically I try and get the candidate to meet with other diverse set of panelists who eventually will be stakeholders for this role, right? So let's say get somebody from product to talk to them, get somebody from a solution engineering background to talk to them, just
Right.
to make sure that we get more diverse perspectives of stakeholders. And then what I really, really like to do is something as much as possible. Obviously, during COVID, it wasn't as possible. Is to try and do a final in-person interview before we roll out an offer. And that is the part where I believe that the hard skills have been measured, but that's when I try and assess more softer skills.
Mm, right. So hard skills and soft skills is what uh, is two different angles that you obviously measure, which is pretty interesting. Awesome. Awesome. And do you have any tips for somebody who probably wants to work for you? Because I'm sure after hearing what you've just had to say, there'll be a lot of people who might want to work for a leader like you, for example.
That's kind of you to say that. I'll tell you a little story. So when I
Sure.
was preparing for my, B school entrances and interviews and all of that, there was this one senior of mine who went to the same school as me, went to the same engineering school as me, and then also the MBA school that I was aspiring to go to. And I was in touch with him, and I talked to him, and I said I used to really look up to that, person. So I said, look, I mean, I'm preparing. I mean, what do I need to do? And I think at that point I had an interview call, like had the written exams done, and there was a GD and a interview call waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He told me, look, the only advice I have for you is just be honest, be transparent. And
Mm.
I think that is one thing that has stayed with me since then. And that's one thing I try and look for because he just told me, look, I mean, the kind of people who are going to interview you have seen hordes of batches like yours, hundreds and thousands of students like you. So if you're trying to be something you're not, it won't take them a minute to figure out. So they would much rather appreciate somebody who comes and tells them, I don't know this, but I want an opportunity to learn this, versus someone who's trying to pretend that, hey, I know everything and I'm the best one for you. So I think that's clearly one advice I have is that be transparent. uh, we as if I sit in the in the shoes or wear the hat of an interviewer or a hiring manager, I do know that it's not likely that I will find a person who knows everything that I'm looking for, but we've already factored it that in that time to coach, mentor, help them get up to speed. So it's all right to say I don't know, but we're really looking for that, that the transparency, that attitude, the right attitude.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good piece of advice. Uh, that's something I resonate myself with. Like I've been to a lot of interviews, and there have been times where I've been asked questions I don't know the answers to. You try to think on the spot, and if you can't, you just say, "I'm sorry, I really don't know. I can get back to you on this later."
And I
So
think
yeah,
that's cause end of the day we're all living in an economy of currency, right? A trust currency. We're
right.
all trying to either gain or lose trust in every transaction, every interaction that we do. I think that really augurs well for your trust currency when you say that I'm sorry, I don't know this, and
Yep.
but I will make up for it if I'm given an opportunity.
Absolutely, and it also shows that you're open to learning, right? So you identify the fact that you don't know a few things, and you're open to learning those, other than just saying, "No, I know everything. If I don't know it, it's probably not important."
100%. I totally agree.
A little bit more about the team and individual PMMs that you have, right? How do you usually go about, uh, you know, how do you decide KPIs and goals for overall the team, and then how do you bifurcate that based on the individual team members that you have?
That's a good question. So typically, I'll tell you. I mean, KPIs and goals will it. The short answer is it depends. It depends totally on the product line. It depends on where that product is in its life cycle, in its growth stage. What are the primary business metrics we're trying to solve? What are the business priorities? Are we trying to skim a market? Are we trying to enter a market? Are we trying to gain share? Are we a competitor brand? Are we a leader brand? A challenger brand? So there are all of these factors, right? Which automatically means that KPIs and goals are very dynamic variables. Which two things. I mean,
Of
one
course.
is they're never static. Two is it'll always depend. Like no two people or no two personas will likely have some similar KPIs, because only then are we really doing justice to the business. Now, talking about how do we go set the KPIs, I think it's we no longer live in an era where we can operate in a silo and the business is operating in a silo and sales is operating in their own silos.
Yep.
I think when we start the year, when we do the planning, I think we all want to make sure that what's the north star, what's the over goal, and then everybody tries and plays a role in it. Like even starting from the top all the way to the last person on the team should be feeling like they're playing a part in that achieving the overall north star. So that's the fundamental by which we start defining KPIs. I know it might sound like a very long-winded answer, but I'll get down to what it essentially means. So across individuals there will always be elements of the KPI that touch different parts of the marketing and sales funnel. So there will always be a KPI around awareness, there'll always be a KPI around demand, there'll always be a KPI around pipeline, there'll always be a
Right.
KPI around revenue and customer advocacy. And again, having said that, there could be, KPIs in a certain year for a certain market which don't adhere to these, but typically, I mean, if you kind of do a bell curve analysis, you will see that most KPIs will at least touch one or multiple parts of the sales and marketing funnel. The other thing that I also try and encourage team members to do is that to have some KPIs or at least one or two KPIs every year, which does not solve an immediate business problem, but which tends to solve a medium to long term problem. Something that's more developmental in nature for them, so that
Right.
they are not just solving the immediate weekly, monthly, quarterly priorities, but also spending some time thinking about how do we solve for that next big problem, which will really reap results in maybe 5 quarters down the line, but allowing them to have that long term view on things.
So yeah, I think that's interesting because it sort of gives you a leeway in terms of innovation as well, right? You get to plan not just 1 week, 1 month, or 3 months. You get to work on the long term plan, which is probably a year or year and a half, like you said, 5 6 quarters. Yeah, so that's interesting as
And that
well.
also allows me to do two things, because again, like, careers are not static, careers are not linear, and a lot of times to grow forward in your career you might need to go sideways, right? Because no career
Yeah.
is linear anymore, especially in the worlds we operate in. Now, if I know that there is a certain interest or an affinity or an aspiration to develop and learn something for an individual, it just allows me to keep my eyes and ears open for when certain opportunities come that align to these aspirations to match them, right? So that way we are also making sure that people stay interested in their roles. People feel that we don't get stagnated too much, and there's always
Right.
room to kind of feel that there's always a challenge, there's always a a concept of learning something new, being able to try out new things.
So there's always a bigger picture that they're sort of working on while also working on immediate short-term goals at the same time. Yeah, that's a good space to be in, I think. Yeah. All right. And so also in terms of measuring the goals and KPIs, especially for a function like product marketing, which is so dynamic and really different from organization to organization, do you have a framework or a standard set of methods to measure your goals as a product marketing function?
I do. I mean, there are obviously internal measures which I won't get into, but I'll tell you conceptually what I do. I mean, my mantra is don't sweat the small stuff, right? And also what I keep I believe strongly in is if you're doing the right thing, the business will gain. It's very unlikely that we feel, hey, we are being very successful, but we are really not moving the needle.
Hmm.
And the other way around, if the needle is moving, which means we are definitely doing something, we can always figure out, how do we kind of establish impact. And the other thing that I keep telling, or at least I strongly believe in, is to spend time, effort, and energy in doing needle moving stuff that moves the needle for the business. If something's not
Right.
working, I have absolutely no qualms in saying let's not pursue this anymore. And there's always a nice way to communicate it to all your stakeholders, saying that hey, we started the year thinking this is going to be a priority. It no longer seems like it's moving the needle. We
Right.
don't want to continue spending our time, energy, dollars, effort on this. How about we close this down? Here are the learnings we now know, and then here is something that we want to pivot to. So always having that nature to take on change, to be open to trying out new things, is something that I strongly believe.
Awesome. So it's more like experiment, measure, iterate.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean,
Perfect.
I really like, I actually really personally, as a product marketer, when I was way more hands on in my career, I would always try and keep a certain amount of time, budget, energy to experiment. And there would always, every quarter, there'd be some small experiments running all the time. And I've been very fortunate to have managers who've encouraged that, who've said that, okay, fair enough, like keep 5% of your budget for experiments. We keep experimenting, we keep learning, and we keep documenting. Like you do 10 experiments, maybe 2 will fly, 8 will fail, but that's fine.
Yep.
But those 2 can clearly get you your next wave of growth.
Awesome. All right, just going back and digging a little bit deeper into team structures, right? I mean, you've been in product marketing for 15 to 17 years, probably more than that. You've been part of a lot of different structures of team. You've built a lot of different types of structures of teams yourself. Is there a particular structure in your experience or something you've come across that did not work, right? Or you felt that it could have worked if it was slightly different, right? Is there anything like that that you've experienced?
Interesting question. I mean, definitely. I'm sure. I mean, no one's perfect. No team structure is perfect. I think this one time, I think we were trying to figure out where, there are horizontal functions and there are vertical functions. So product marketeers were more vertical, and then there was a horizontal function which was supporting multiple levers of business. And the the horizontal function did not have a single leader. So people on the horizontal functions were mapped to product marketing leaders. Now the logic there was that, okay, like let's say you are managing a product which is in its early life cycle stage, so you need more awareness. So the person driving
Hmm.
the awareness campaigns was kind of reporting into you or had a dotted line to you. So there I felt it worked for some, it did not work for some, because I think the accountability was lost, and because they were so over indexed on one portfolio of the business, because that's where the management change rolled up to, other parts of the business could have may have not
Fair
enjoyed
enough.
the same amount of efficiency and growth. So that's one structure I feel that in principle did not work, but there are tons and tons of examples when structures haven't worked. And I have also felt that most organizations are open to moving things around just to make sure that we drive higher efficiencies.
Right. Right. I mean, it goes back to the previous point we were talking about experiment, measure, and iterate, right? You try a particular structure, you think it'll work, but it doesn't, so iterate on
Correct.
that, right? So,
And yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah.
I think the last question for the day, Gaurav, would be what would be your advice for young product marketing leaders who are just starting out, let's say a new job or trying to build a new team, a new function on their own? What would be your advice to them in terms of how they can get up to be as successful, build a successful function of product marketing?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that, but I'll try. I think the one word I would say for anybody aspiring to build a product marketing team or set up one is embrace. That's one word that I feel works well. We don't live in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect business environment, and everything is changing all the time. All the more given the fact that we're trying to build a function in a region that has traditionally not been known for this function. Now you can
Right.
look at it both ways. You can either look at it as, hey, India doesn't have great product marketing talent, or you can say India has the best product marketing talent because of the diversity. So like I said, I mean, definitely try and embrace, and I'll kind of dive deeper into what I mean by that. I mean that definitely have very high standards on identifying those core skills that you need a PMM
Mm-hmm.
to have. And then please knock yourself out, please experiment with the adjacent skills, because that is going to be like that, like that real X factor when you build out your team, because now suddenly you've got a team that has got not just core PMM skills, which is table stakes, I would say, any part of the world. Now
Right.
you've got a team that also understands SEO, that also understands search engine marketing, also understands content, understands events, understands webinars, understands PR, growth, demand, what have you. And India is the place for that. Like nobody knows social and demand. Like I work in a global role, so I work with marketers all around the world. Kushal, I can put my money on this when I say that marketers in India have so many. It's almost like a Swiss Army knife. It's almost like they have so many skills that they can dip into, right? So that's an
Right.
area I would say please embrace as product marketing leaders, as people who are trying to set up new teams. Please embrace that. Two other things. Sitting in the shoes of, or wearing the hat of a leader, I would say that please make sure you're factoring enough and more time to coach and mentor, because as leaders you've had those opportunities, you've had those
True.
experiences. When you're trying to put a new team in place, please factor in the time to have a great onboarding experience, to give them the kind of coaching, the mentoring that should account for a large part of the first 3 to 6 months. Wearing the hat of the people on the team, I think as leaders it's our responsibility to build a culture where we are all encouraged to share and and
Right.
foster peer learning. Because like I said, because everyone is so different, it's so diverse. If you can create a culture where sharing is rewarded versus feels like, hey, I need to hold it close to my chest and be territorial about it, that's not a culture that really works. Versus if you can create a culture, hey, I know this, I've figured this out, I would love to tell you more about it. When that kind of a culture is there within the team,
Mm-hmm.
I think the teams grow faster than you can even imagine. I have one mantra when it comes to my teams. I keep telling my teams that when one of us wins, everyone wins. So make sure that each of us is kind of um, uh, trying to build that culture. um, what else? And second thing I would say
Wow.
is that there are two ways to look at it. Like, hygiene precedes glory. As a product marketing leader, if you can get the house in order, keep all the elements, your bill of materials, get that hygiene built out, trust me, there will be much bigger things uh, happening to these kind of teams.
Yeah, I think glory becomes easy once you have the hygiene, the house in order, like you said, right? Then glory is probably just one step away from that. So pretty spot on.
Absolutely. So you want you
Awesome.
you spend time, effort, energy building your foundation, and once that foundational layer is there, I mean, then the sky is the limit.
Great, great, awesome. Thanks a lot, Gaurav. This has been a lovely conversation. Thanks a lot for your time and candidly sharing all your personal and your professional experience with our audience. Uh, I've really enjoyed talking to you and finally getting to meet you as well. And I'm sure our audience will enjoy this episode of Product Marketing Perspective with you. Uh, to close things
Thank
off,
you, Kushal.
Gaurav,
I want to take a moment to say thank you. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, and I learn as much, I mean, it's a two-way street. So I've learned a lot. Thanks for asking those questions. Allows me to think and
Great.
reflect. So I'm certainly taking back a lot as well.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. That's really humble of you, and which is also something that comes across all your entire perspective on product marketing, right? As a leader, I think it's really important to be humble, and that's something I've really enjoyed talking to you about as well. So Gaurav, if any of our listeners want to connect with you or get in touch with you, what's the best place for them to do that?
I think the easiest would be to find me on LinkedIn. It's also easy because I spell my name with an O, so it's Gourav versus Gaurev. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Even if I'm not like immediately responsive, I definitely look at LinkedIn and I will catch up and I will certainly be sure to drop a note.
Correct. Awesome. Well, thanks once again, Gaurav. It's been lovely talking to you. Hope to have you here again sometime soon.